Hey everyone, welcome to the video. I hope you are having a really good day wherever you are watching this today. And I'm really excited today because today I'm going to be interviewing Anna, who has recently worked with me and she has achieved some fantastic results. And you are going to want to stick around and listen to this story because I think parts of it, or maybe, any amount of it is gonna resonate with you. And Anna agreed to do the interview if she went on a camera. She is just a little bit camera shy at the moment, so we've just taken her off camera and also just changed her name. But believe me, her story is very real, and she has worked very hard and achieved a lot of really good results. So, Anna, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. And I'm just curious, how you're doing at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. I'm doing well. I'm very happy with the way my life is going in general, of course. And yeah, I feel um, much more comfortable than I did about a year ago when I met Dan for the first time.
Mm. All right, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, it's great that to have you on, and we will get into all of that stuff. Um, but I was curious if we could just sort of take a bit of a step back, and I was just curious how your life was going before all the stuff sort of happened. Before your life sort of turned upside down. How was life then?
To give a little bit of context, when all the stuff happened was around the pandemic. So life before that was basically pre-pandemic life. I was in university. I was with friends. I was having a good time. I was taking classes. I was in my third year of university, so just it was a 4-year program. So yep, just trying to figure out what I want to do next, but not thinking too hard about it. So life was good. It was stressful, but in the way regular life is for university students.
Mm. Okay, sure. So basically, you were just getting on with it, going to uni, figuring out what you wanted to do. Pandemic hadn't hit yet. Life was just sort of going on as normal. That'd be sort of
Hmm.
fair to say. Okay,
For sure.
cool. Okay, and then obviously you did get affected by the anxiety or the DPDR or all that type of stuff. Do you want to sort of talk maybe a little bit about how that happened or what it was like going from your normal daily routine into something which was very unfamiliar to you?
Yeah, for sure. So when the pandemic hit, I basically flew home to my parents instantaneously. So there was like a 24-hour period where I went from being a pretty normal university student to just living back home with my parents, which I feel like a lot of people experienced at the time. And then I proceeded to spend 6 months at home, and where I was, the lockdown was pretty severe. So there was very minimal going out or meeting other people. So it was a pretty intense environment. I will say that I do get on well with my parents, so it was actually not so bad. But towards the end of it, I kind of started feeling like something was maybe not quite right. And I was like, maybe I've spent too much time indoors. Maybe I'm just getting desensitized to my environment. I really wasn't sure what was going on. Um, but then when I went back to university for my final year, is when things really started to feel kind of off. And I really didn't feel like I had the vocabulary, or I honestly had no idea what was going on. Things just like didn't feel right. It didn't feel like I was experiencing the world the way that I used to.
Mm. And so, how were you experiencing it?
I kind of felt like everything was muted almost, like um the colors were not as bright maybe, or I know a common way of describing it that really resonated with me was like seeing things through like a glass. Um so it just felt like I was two steps removed from my surroundings. And even though I sort of felt like I knew what was going on, not in my head, but around me. I kind of felt very detached from it. I felt like I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't engage with anything. I was just basically on autopilot.
Mm. Okay, sure. Yeah. And did this, how quickly did this come on? For example, was it a go to bed and wake up and it was there, or it happened over a couple of weeks, or how would you describe it?
Honestly, it's a little hard to say. I feel like the onset was maybe even like a couple of months because I was at my parents' house for so long, and that's a very safe space for me. So I was very comfortable there, very familiar with everything there. So there weren't as many, I guess, stimuli around me. So it's hard for me to say when the onset was, but I would say that I definitely felt the effects in full force when I left my parents' apartment and went back to my campus.
Mm. And so I guess what was going through your mind then when you left your parents' house and you went back to campus?
Initially I kind of attributed it to being in shock. Like suddenly it's such a changed environment, and I'm in a place where there's so much going on, and there's so much that's unfamiliar, and my campus is obviously different than it was before with all the COVID precautions. Um, so I didn't really think that much of it initially, but then when the dust kind of settled a little bit and it still wouldn't go away, I started to get a little stressed. And I tried to talk to some friends to see whether this was like a relatable experience, and it was not. Which was like not, it obviously wasn't very encouraging for me. So yeah, I could not figure out what was going on, and I was like trying to Google things, but again, I just had no vocabulary. I didn't know what depersonalization was, derealization. I never heard these words in my life. So I felt very scared and confused.
Mm. And so I guess what was life for you like then? I mean, obviously you're back at campus, COVID's hit, there's a lot of difference and you're going through all this stuff. Can you sort of describe what life was like generally during that period?
Um, Honestly, it was not the best period. I felt very low very frequently, and I think a lot of it was that I mean, firstly, my future was uncertain, and then I was very far away from my family during this trying time. And all that compounded with the fact that I was really scared and I just didn't know what was happening in my head, whether I would ever feel like quote unquote normal again, or like I felt at such a loss because I just didn't know what was happening, how to solve it, what to do. So that honestly, that brought me pretty low for most of the time. um I would go out and I would see friends, but a lot of it was just like going through the motions, or maybe drinking a lot and to just like try and feel something different, or hoping it'll go away or change. Um, yeah, so it was definitely a scary period.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think a lot of people go through something similar where they don't really know what's happening or they've never experienced it before. And they try and talk to people, and people almost look at them with a blank stare, like not really
Mhm.
understanding how it's going. And I was wondering, did you have any type of support when you were going through this?
Um, so I tried to get in contact with one of my university therapists, and they were really not a good fit. They couldn't really understand what I was talking about. They just told me to meditate, and I did. I really tried, and it just did not help me. Um, And yeah, I just felt so helpless because I was like, if a professional is not able to identify this and help me, then what am I going to do?
Mm. That's a really good question. So I guess what did you start to do to help you through this?
So it was actually interesting because I was out for drinks one night with my roommate's middle school art teacher. So a very far connection for me. Um, and she mentioned something, she mentioned the word, I think, depersonalization, and about, I don't think she was even talking about herself. I'm not sure what the context was, but I was like, oh, what is that? Because I was like, deperson, that kind of sounds like something I would relate to. Um, and she was like, "Oh, it's when you feel disconnected, etc., etc." And I was like, "Okay." So finally, I had a word for what I was kind of going through. I went home and I did extensive googling, and I was like, "Oh my god, I finally have something to hold on to. Like, this is what's going on to me. I'm not crazy. I'm not like, this is not something that's unique to only me. There's a community out there." So that was honestly a big turning point. But even still, at that point, I was months from like finding you or finding a solution or anything, but I was just so happy to finally have a label on what it was.
Mm. And when you found that label, did you find that it made you better in any way?
Um, I mean, it felt good for a couple of days afterwards, just knowing that I could call it something, but after a while the novelty wore off and I was like, okay, great, I have a name, but I still don't have like a way to tackle this because I feel like online it's there wasn't that much that helped me out. Yeah, I don't know whether that was just my experience, but like I just couldn't find something that really told me I kind of wanted something to be like, this is what you're supposed to do and this is gonna help you. And there was nothing like that. So it helped for a little bit and then not so much.
Sure. Yeah. So let's just sort of quickly, like summarize where we're at right now. Where you're at is that you were going to uni and everything was fine, and then the pandemic hit, and then you went back home to live with your parents. You stayed with your parents for a little while, and you couldn't really go out because the COVID restrictions are quite strong there. And then when you did, and you sort of noticed that you were feeling perhaps a little bit different, couldn't maybe quite put a word to it, and then you went back to do your final year of uni and everything was completely different because of COVID, and you started to experience, I guess, depersonalization, the symptoms quite a lot more strongly, and then it just seemed to sort of continue from there. You couldn't really, well, you sought out a therapist but they didn't really help. You couldn't really talk to anyone, but then you found what it was and you did a lot of research, and that's sort of where we're at right now. Would that be sort of a fair assessment?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. And so I guess now that you knew what you had, what did you start to do to try and help yourself through it or to get out of it?
Um, Honestly, I spent a lot of time on the internet. Um, that's pretty much what I did. Beyond that, I really tried to stay active. Um, but after a point, I just stopped doing that because I was like, this is not helping. And honestly, it threw me into kind of a depression. Um, so I really didn't know what to do. I had and have still a partner at the time who I was relying pretty heavily on. And I shared a lot of my experience with him, and he couldn't relate, but it kind of felt good to be able to um, share what I was feeling more intimately with someone. But Yeah, I really felt like I was at a loss. I had no idea what to do. I was like, maybe once I find a job, it'll go away. I found a job, it did not go away. Maybe once I do X exam, it'll end. So I kept creating these landmarks, and like each time I would pass it, nothing would happen. So yeah, I just felt very helpless.
Mm. And why do you think that, reaching these landmarks didn't help, or what you were trying wasn't giving you the results that you wanted?
Um, I think I mean, hindsight is 2020. So in retrospect, I think that I just didn't know that it was like a thought pattern. I just thought it was something that was maybe physically wrong with me after a point. After I like started journaling, I started running, I tried to do all the classic wellness stuff. And it just wouldn't help. So I just I don't know. I think I never realized that it was something, or it felt like something that was beyond me to be able to control. Whereas now, obviously, I know that's not the case, but at the time, it just really felt like this huge thing that was looming over me, and there was just no way to escape it.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. And so, I mean, obviously, that's a pretty not good thing to feel. It's you don't want to go through life feeling like that. Um, so, I mean, eventually, then you found me, and I guess I was just curious, what led you to, find me and eventually reach out to me?
Yeah, so I graduated from uni, and I changed cities to pursue a job. And I was very lonely in my new city because I didn't have any friends, and I was not a big fan of my job, and that was very stressful for me. So I think that compounded with the DPDR really put me in kind of a dark place. And this was something I only confided in my partner. Um, so I think he is also a big Googler. So he was Googling, and he actually found you first. And he sent me a link to something, or maybe it was your YouTube channel. I don't remember. And he was like, "Why don't you check out this guy? He does free consultations." And I was like, honestly, I have nothing to lose. Might as well. Um, and yeah, that is how I found you.
Okay, sure. Um, no, that's cool because I was really curious of that. And so I guess there are a lot of people out that can help with this type of stuff. Hypnotherapists, coaches, psychologists, and all that. I was just wondering why, or what drew you to chat to me specifically out of all of the options out there.
Um, so actually now I'm remembering, I think he found you on Reddit, or there was like a Reddit thread or something. And I believe he found you there and then sent me that. And then I looked you up, and I think I found your YouTube channel. And I was like, this is the first time I'm finding content that is so relatable. Because before that, I had found the DPDR manual, um, which was pretty helpful. But I think seeing something in video form and having someone who's actively putting out videos and stuff was really helpful for me. And then I was like, I might as well schedule the consultation. And then the first time we talked, um, so I saw that one therapist, and then I saw two more after that guy. And I felt like they really didn't understand me. But then when we talked, I felt like you did understand what was happening and what we were going through, and you seemed very confident that you would be able to help me through it. And that was kind of the life raft I needed. So yeah, that is the first 30-minute conversation we had really gave me a lot of hope.
Mm. Okay, great. And okay, so we've had the consultation, and then you decide, hey, well, let's go for it and see what happens. I was just curious what it was like for you going through the first sort of couple of sessions.
Um, it was really helpful actually, because I think it was the first time I had ever experienced coaching as opposed to therapy, and I I didn't realize they were different things, but they really are. So talking to you and being able to kind of come to conclusions myself was something that was really helpful for me. Um, and yeah, I think during the first couple of sessions, or honestly, during probably at the end of the second session, was the first time I believed in like 2 years that this was something that was within my power to overcome. Um, so yeah, it was a really nice moment for me, and it was something that was honestly I felt quite powerful because I had felt so helpless for so long, and I finally saw what I was experiencing as a symptom of my situation as opposed to the thing that was kind of defining my situation.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of good points you make in there as well. Particularly, I guess the two main ones are the difference between coaching and therapy,
Mhm.
and that difference sort of brings me to the second point you made, which was it empowers you. It lets
Mhm.
you come to your own conclusions, um, which is potentially where that empowerment comes from. Instead of telling you what to do, you sort of figure out what to do yourself, and then take the lead. And
Mhm.
so I guess I was just curious then, how quickly or how slowly, or just in general, how things started to change, as we had our sessions week to week.
Um, I would honestly say I would say it was twofold. The first thing was um, the realization that what I was going through was in fact a thought pattern, and it was just it was as I kind of said, like a symptom of the circumstances I was in, because I was in a house that I didn't like. I was in a job that I didn't like, in a city where I was alone. And I remember you saying, like, of course, you don't feel connected to your surroundings. You're not connected to your surroundings. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. I need to figure out how to settle down. So, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something that I needed to work on that was concrete, and it was that I need to get my life together and I need to settle down and make this place my home. Um, and so that kind of became my goal. And as I was working on it, I kind of felt things in my mind with the DPDR easing up a little bit, but it did take me a long time to um, every time I felt a little bit off to turn off that fear that the DPDR is coming back and instead realize that this is when I'm tired, of course I'm going to feel disconnected. That's a very normal and human thing for to happen. But each time I felt not in the pink of health, that was like, oh my god, my DPDR is coming back, this is the end. So yeah, just not being very fatalist in that way.
Mm. And how did it feel for you having those tools, and having that awareness of not letting yourself follow the thoughts, and realizing that you do have perhaps more control than what you think? How did that sort of help you with your situation in your day-to-day life?
It helped a lot. It helped a lot. Not only with DPDR, I would say, but just in general, because it kind of, I think I was at a point where, I mean, a lot of people are at this point where I'm out of university and I have to start being an adult, and nobody gives you guidelines for that. So I felt like I was floundering a little bit. So talking to you kind of made me realize that I am in fact the captain of my own ship, and I have to start taking charge. And whether that's of my circumstances, my mental health, my physical health, that is all up to me. So it felt good. It felt good that to feel that my life was in my own hands, which it hadn't felt like for like 2 years prior.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, and I think that's a good expression too. Your life's in your own hands. So now that you are getting your life back in your own hands, you know, through the help of our sessions and you just generally, sort of snowballing in a positive way in your life, I was just curious about what started to happen now then? What changes did you start to notice perhaps in a more positive way?
Um, Sorry, do you mind clarifying that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I was just curious, before we started working together, you were a little lost at sea, you were worried, you were scared, and now you said you've realized that, well, hey, I am in control of my life and it is up to me
Mhm.
to get my life where I want it. And I was just
Mhm.
wondering sort of what positive effects that mindset brought on for you in terms
Gotcha.
of what's happening in your day and your life.
Makes sense. I think in general, just having that consciousness that you are not, I mean, at least I am not a victim of my circumstance. I have a lot of freedom in what I decide to do. I realize that's not the case for everyone, but I'm fortunate enough for that. And for example, I'm still in the job that I don't like. I hope none of my coworkers hear this. But I have come to realize that it's just a job and it's not my whole life. And it's something that is very much within my power to change. And even things outside of work, for example, a living situation that was not so favorable for me, it was in my power to change. It was an inconvenience to change it. Sure, moving is always an inconvenience, but it was within my power to change. And I did, and I'm so much happier for it. So, really, I think the saying that you told me a few times initially, I was like, but the get out of bed and grab an oar, it's true. I feel like making excuses and saying that something is not possible uh is definitely kind of a cop out, and after a while you just have to face it no matter how difficult it is. And that was kind of my initial approach with my DPDR as well.
Mm. Oh, that's cool that you remember that expression, and it's
Yeah.
I think it is a really powerful one, and it's one that gets people to where they want to get to, and I think you're sort of
Mhm.
living proof of that. And so, what happened then with all your symptoms during this time? Did they sort of just turn off, or they slowly diminished, or what happened with all of them?
They definitely did not turn off. Honestly, even after our sessions, they were still prevalent for a couple of months, but I just had to keep reminding myself that it's something I can't think about too much, and I can't feed too much, because the more I think about it, the worse it becomes. So honestly, for me, it was an exercise in just forgetting about it, just not giving it attention and pretending it's not there, ghosting it, if you may. Um, so yeah, and I'll be honest that sometimes even now when I'm very tired or very socially drained and I kind of feel like I don't want to engage with people or anyone or anything anymore, I'm like, this kind of feels like how DPDR did. But then my immediate follow up has to be like, but it's not. You're just tired. Go to bed. Like, so yeah, it definitely does take a while to break that thought pattern, because it's so deeply entrenched, and it was so traumatizing that yeah, it definitely takes a while before you're like, oh, I'm totally free of this, and it happens. I would never have believed that this was something that I could change with my own mind, but it well and truly was.
Mm. And that's a really good point you make as well about like the symptoms. You don't just flick a switch and they suddenly turn off. And often that's actually quite normal and common for people to have the sessions, whether it's me or somebody else. And your brain sort of has to sort of walk its own path, so to speak. Like I can't hold your
Mhm.
hand anymore, and if you've been in this state for quite a long time, doesn't really matter how long, but it just means that it might take, a little bit of time after the sessions to get out of it, just as you sort of get used to it. But I guess the good news is that it can happen, and it does happen. And as you say, if you do notice perhaps something coming back, now you've got the tools, you've got the awareness, you've got the knowledge to basically say, no, that's just me tired. Like the old me would have panicked and gone on Google for 8 hours
Mhm.
researching, but the
Yeah.
new me is just like, whatever, I'll just go to bed.
Yeah. No, for sure. That's definitely it. I definitely feel like on days where I wake up a little earlier around 9 p.m., I'm like, oh no, my DPDR is back, but it's not. I just have not slept enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about now then. How's the life for you now? Sort of post pandemic, post sessions with me. You've sort of been out for a little while. How's it all
Mhm.
going?
I would say it's going well. I would say that I definitely feel like I am experiencing more of my life. Though, as we did talk about, once I got out of my DPDR, kind of left like a little bit, kind of left a lot of mental real estate empty for me. And I had to find a new way to kind of focus my thoughts and focus my life because for so long, my number one goal in life was getting rid of it. And then suddenly it was gone, which is obviously a great thing. But then I was like, how do I get fulfilled in my life? So that was like a whole other can of worms that I'm still working through. But yeah, with those doubts and with those fears of fulfillment and deriving happiness and all that kind of stuff, I feel like a regular 20 something year old. I no longer feel like someone who is isolated and scared. I feel like I'm in it with all of my friends trying to figure out what we're doing here and what we're supposed to do and where we're going to go and all of that. So, yeah, I feel a sense of normalcy that I had lacked for so long, and I feel like I can finally relate to my friends and they can relate to me, and our day-to-day worries are now the same, even though a couple years ago they had not been.
Mm. Wow, that's amazing to hear you say that.
Mhm.
It's almost like taking us right back to the beginning when we first started chatting, and you were just like, yeah, I'm at uni and life's just normal and things are going normally. And now it's kind of like, yeah, well, life is normal and I can relate to my friends. But I guess, you've obviously been through this and you're a little wiser. And now it's sort of human nature to go from one issue to the next. It's like the
Mhm.
DPDR's fixed. Now let's work on getting a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Um, how confident are you that you're going to be able to sort of reach those goals, or is that sort of a question which is a bit too big to answer
Work
in
in
30
progress.
seconds?
I think I'm gonna need more sessions to figure that out. Yeah, but I mean, it definitely feels those goals definitely feel more reachable and tangible because they're definitely more common. Um, so there's a lot of content on Google. I know because I've checked on that relative to DPDR. So it's definitely a confusing space, but not a scary one.
Mm, mm, cool. And okay, and so I guess like to sort of wrap up then, what advice would you give anybody, or what would you like to say to anybody who is going through what you went through, or something similar to that?
Hmm. Um, I would say firstly, don't feel like you're alone because feeling isolated is definitely something that's scary. And definitely something that makes the experience much worse. Um, you're not alone. There are people who are going through it, um, even if it's not as spoken about. Um, you do not have to deal with it alone. For me personally, trying to deal with it alone through the DPDR manual and things like that wasn't helpful because I just didn't know how to interpret it. Um, so yeah, Dan or whoever else, they're definitely great resources and great people to help you through it. And finally, don't give up hope. It's a very cliched thing to say about pretty much everything, but I mean it. Um, you will find your next worry to move on to soon.
Awesome. That's a really nice, succinct way of putting it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, don't give up hope. You'll find your next worry soon. Um,
Yeah,
Great.
the
Well,
worries aren't going to end.
no, I don't think they ever do. But we try and have more of the positive and less of the negative. But it is always, you can never have just one or the other.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, great. Well, look, thanks so much for chatting. And I know everyone watching is really going to really appreciate hearing your story, and all the best for the future. And I hope you do figure it out. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on here.